I played the Captain Kangaroo theme and waxed poetic as I was reading from the Oregon Department of Education's Restorative Practice and Restorative Justice page. And they talk about the description of restorative justice. It uses non-punitive interventions to heal harm done and strengthen relationships. Defined as an innovative approach to offending and inappropriate behavior, this would be in school, of course, which puts repairing harm done to relationships and people over and above the need for assigning blame and dispensing punishment. A restorative approach at a school shifts the emphasis from managing behavior to focusing on building, nurturing, and repairing relationships. And before I bring on Mr. X, this is my favorite part. Restorative practices is a system-wide approach to cultural over-reliance on discipline practices, exclusionary discipline practices, in other words, suspending and getting people out of the school, using indigenous circles as a model for building upon relationships and activating the voices of all parties. Mr. X, it gives me such a warm fuzzy to know that people carrying guns and knives and getting into serious fights and threatening people in the Medford 549C school district will get you into an indigenous circle, and maybe you'll start learning about how to apply indigenous fire to the forest, too, for that matter. I don't know.
Well, let's rely upon an indigenous circle for every solution we need, Bill.
That's right.
And I just look at it as, these people have such a skewed way of looking at things that it's so frustrating. And I mean, it's like reading through this and, sending you the things that I found across, all over the board.
And by the way, I wanted to add, before Mr. X is our kind of our lead community activist researcher who glazes his eyes over, he takes his very shiny bald head with a big brain inside it, and you dig through and you find the legal pathways that bring some of the misery into Oregon. And much of it is due to the consensus process, which is pushed exclusively by the Oregon State University system. Policy consensus. We have a consensus process here with our stakeholders and our invited stakeholders that agree to the predetermined outcome. And apparently what happened in many school districts here a number of years ago, Ed, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we had a bunch of consensus people getting together and saying, too many people are being thrown out of school, and it doesn't look good for the schools, and we have to be gentler with these people. I mean, so what if they, beat a fellow classmate almost to death and knifed him or something like that? We have to be inclusive and talk with this individual and get him back into the school. It's kind of a shortcut, isn't it, really, that we're talking about here?
What we do is just have to sit in a circle, sing Kumbaya, and invite him to remain with our circle so he can stab the next guy in line, okay?
Yeah.
Some of these things are just so ridiculous, but over the years, we've talked about this stuff so long, and what I do is I try to look at the trails of wrongful policy being implemented and what are the results of this policy years later, okay? And you look at this, and I sent you all of that stuff yesterday, and you find the years that it began, you find all of these things. But I want to take a moment and just read something to you that I feel is very important. Now, for years, we've talked about the consensus process through Oregon Solutions, the National Policy Consensus Center,
right,
all of these things. But this is a paper, and it's imperative to hear this because this sets the focus on what you're dealing with. So I'm going to start off here. It says, eventually the field of public policy dispute resolution became nested in an array of processes now known as collaborative governance. Now I'm going to stop there for just a moment and take the Constitution of Oregon and do a word search for collaborative governance. Okay?
You won't find it.
First bit of advice.
You won't find it there, Ed. All right?
Type in the word consensus. You won't find it there.
No.
But now let me go on. Oregon Consensus joined Oregon Solutions in the National Policy Consensus Center, NPCC, at Portland State, forming a hub for collaborative governance and offering a range of services for Oregon agencies and communities. While Oregon Consensus focuses on collaborative agreement seeking, formerly called public policy dispute resolution, Oregon Solutions focuses on creating the conditions for collective action. In agreement-seeking processes, the participants endeavor to arrive at a shared decision, and in collective action processes, the participants strive to achieve shared goals by aggregating their resources. In 2011, NPCC partnered with the Policy Consensus Initiative and a group of community-based partners to found Oregon's Kitchen Table, a statewide community engagement program.
Where have we heard about that taking over the process? Like this is with the jet boats on the upper road.
With the jet boats on the river. A statewide community engagement program that helps bring the voices of ordinary Oregonians into collaborative processes. Now, I'm going to stop there and say into the collaborative processes that have a predetermined outcome. So you look at this whole thing, now the next statement is very, it's necessary. For the past 15 years or so, the infrastructure supporting mediation, dispute resolution, and collaborative governance in Oregon has been relatively stable, allowing for the practice to proliferate and take hold in a wide array of contexts.
Now, would this be clear? And what we're talking about is that citizens don't really have true proper input. They don't have hearings. They have conversations. Would that be fair?
They have conversations, and basically at the conversations, they don't tell them that they're literally part of a process that has a predetermined outcome, and this is what's going to happen anyway. And you look at this, now they go into a thing, though there have been ups and downs in state funding and attitudes towards mediation and other dispute resolution practices, the infrastructure and funding has remained basically intact. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, you got to go to the next, where it says, with regard to statewide policy, the most innovative new legislation of the last few years has been related to restorative justice.
Aha! Ding, 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 ding.
Right. The 2019 legislature applied a restorative justice lens to both juvenile justice reform and criminal cases involving a finding of mental illness. The community dispute resolution centers are supporting many of the local efforts in using restorative justice to reduce youth recidivism. In addition, the Oregon Department of Education has made restorative justice a high priority in its long-range strategy to strengthen school communities and increase graduation rates.
And, of course, how do they do this? By keeping people who shouldn't really be in the school, in my opinion, Ed. I think that's what Michael Williams, the school board member of Medford 549C, was kind of concerned that, the school resource officer, saying that, we're not taking these violent people seriously, right?
Well, I want to finish this last one, and it'll put a cap on this, okay? Oregon's community dispute resolution centers have also been supporting restorative justice programs in schools across the state. According to the Oregon Office for Community Dispute Resolution's most recent report, a project piloting restorative justice at Central Medford High School significantly reduced other disciplinary actions by the schools over 3 consecutive academic years. Now, you notice one thing there, Bill. What did they say?
Disciplinary actions.
Disciplinary action.
It doesn't say anything about whether there was actual violence reduction and an increase in safety.
That's right. That's the key thing here. But the reality is, I sit back and I read this stuff. I look at this like you do. I don't have a dog in the fight with a child in school right now, but I do pay a huge amount of property taxes. So now I look at this and I say, if I am sitting here and I'm investing in a school system and I end up with the results, and let's go through the results. You said it yesterday on your program. Basically, I verified it this morning. Oregon ranks 45th in the country in the schools. Okay, 45th.
Yep.
Now, we're investing in something that these people are telling us is the pathway forward, yet we're ranked 45th. Now, maybe they do increase graduations, but what are these kids being graduated with as far as the abilities to function in society? And all you have to do is drive through Medford and start looking at some of the different things that you see that have become acceptable because of the circle thing that they're talking about. And I look at this, and if I'm investing in something, I want a positive outcome. I want our schools to be the best. I want our schools to show a pattern of moving forward with education because we are in a competitive world. And I start thinking about, well, where are the root foundational causes for this? And you look at this in our own legislature, developing this pathway, giving the academics at the National Policy Consensus Center at Portland State University, we're giving in to people that are out to destroy us. That's the reality, because they want to reduce the level of prosperity for this country to make everything more equitable across the world.
Yeah, equitable means really a shared level of misery rather than anyone really truly prospering in this. That's my belief here, Ed. Okay?
And I can come up with no other logical conclusion, because you don't strive to make yourself the worst educational system in the country. At number 45, we're only, there's 5 states out of 50 that are worse than us. Okay. And I look at that and I'm thinking, what in the heck is going on? We live in a beautiful place.
Yeah, but then you look at the policies which pass school boards, and it appears that the Oregon Department of Education is all in on, especially with restorative justice. Restorative justice, given what we heard from Michael Williams, given what the SRO who was reassigned ended up bringing up concerns, you may have fewer disciplinary actions, but you're having more violence, and you're having children who are concerned, and you have parents who are concerned. So we are going to sacrifice the whole of the student population in order to what? Get some equity points for some violent, maladjusted students remaining in the school environment for everybody else, Ed? Is that too far of a way to go?
Well, let me ask you this, Bill. One of the things I sent you was a quotation out of a document, and it's almost necessary to read the whole thing to get the total context for folks. But how would you compare Medford to Oakland, California?
Medford is a considerably better community than Oakland overall. All right,
okay.
We have our issues. All right.
Why would we take a model out of Oakland and use it as an example to literally implement and go forward with and do things?
I know I was going to bring this up, and I'm glad you did. I'm going to read. This is from the Oregon Solutions documents on restorative justice, which, of course, Medford 549C's, signed on to. Restorative justice. School Health Works 28. Following are some examples of how costs have been shared in collaboration with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. That's RJOY. RJOY successfully reached out to communities outside of Oakland to expand restorative justice training opportunities in the area and to share costs among regional restorative justice efforts. Developing positive relationships with these communities and agencies has played a large part. Sonoma County, north of Oakland, has been using restorative justice processes prior to RJOY's existence. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, here we go. Residents in Medford, Oregon, Ed, a full day's drive north of Oakland, began collaborating with RJOY after Rita attended a presentation by Howard Zur in Medford. After meeting and talking to people working in the schools, Rita, who was working for RJOY at the time, invited Medford and Cloverdale to collaborate and share costs to bring Kay Pranis, an experienced trainer and practitioner, to the region. This collaboration continues as stories and experiences are often shared. So we invited a program from the ultra-violent Oakland School District into Medford.
Here's the thing to focus on, and this is in giving respect to your previous guests on all levels. He entered this in what year? 2023, 2024, when he was elected?
Yes.
Okay. The date was in what we just had there. It's 2007. Okay, these people have been at work in the background doing this for a long time. And if we're to make comments to our school boards, if we are to strive for a better educational system, it's imperative to cut off the head of the snake, the poisonous snake that is actually destroying it. And you have to understand how strong of a foundation that's there. And when you look at that, okay, well, you trace it down. Howard Zare. Well, I sent you this stuff on Howard Zare. There's a group, an academic group, they call it, or some foundation, or,
I think it's a foundation, Howard Zare Foundation. Yeah.
Well, what did they say in what you just read? To share costs. They're taking my money and paying a consultant to come in and teach them what is ultimately destroying us.
The kumbaya circle approach to school discipline with really violent students, right? That's ultimately.
It. That's it. And, the bottom line is, through, my age, I go back when I was young, I've seen violence in schools. I've seen it firsthand in ways you can't believe. Now, reality to it is that changed over time because they had to show that there was a punitive harm. There has to be. All of our children right now are sitting back saying, well, it doesn't matter what I do because I can sit back after a while and just have a circle approach and I'm forgiven. I mean,
all I have to do is say, I talked to an individual who couldn't go on the air, Ed. This was a couple of hours ago. And he was talking about, Bill, this restorative justice is involved all up and down the juvenile justice system, And I guess he was working within it in some capacity, and I forget what his name was. And he said, this is it. He says, it's almost as if all you have to do is apologize enough, and then you're supposed to, okay, well, you're forgiven, and now you can go back into society or go back to school. That seems to be his impression of how restorative justice is actually working in real effect.
Well, that's the thing that I look at, Bill, and I just find it so offensive. Okay?
We should all be offended by this.
But I find it offensive because I find it basically illegal, okay? And, I talked a little bit about it with you personally yesterday, but there are laws in place they're supposed to inform us.
I know. I'm going to read this so people understand this. All this information we're talking about, every single bit of it, I'm putting on the Bill Meyer Show blog this morning. They are links that you can go to and you can read the same sort of information that Ed and I have been talking about here. Because what needs to happen is that there needs such a rising outrage of public pressure from we the people that comments made to the Medford 549C school board are you immediately withdraw and cancel all these contracts and agreements from these policy consensus groups, and especially the ones that are fostering restorative justice. It's not working for you. It's obvious that it's not working for you. And Officer Josh Doney's transfer is part and parcel of this here, Ed. But the law that you're speaking about is ORS 192.620. The Oregon form of government requires an informed public aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which decisions are made. And the intent of this is that decisions of governing bodies must be arrived at openly. And I don't believe that parents sending their kids to public schools have been informed that essentially the justice system has been gutted for violent students within their schools. Would you agree with me? Is that a good way of putting it?
I would agree totally with you, Bill, because that's the obvious thing to you and I, because we've read this. Until you read this stuff, until you take the effort. Now, if you're a parent and you've got these kids in school, you got to understand what they're faced with. They go into a situation that your kids may be the best kids in the world, but they're faced with dealing with kids that aren't. And the most that they have to suffer through is sitting in a circle, and they can come back and do everything that they want to do. And what are they going to do? They're going to remove the student resource officer because he told the truth.
Yep.
And I look at this, and there's a group here. There's another one, RJCO. And these are things people just don't exist. This is the Restorative Justice Coalition of Oregon. And they go through, look it up, read it. restorative justice practices, restorative conferencing, restorative circles, victim offender dialogue. I was reading.
Oh, yeah. So the kid in school that knifes you is to go in front of you and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry," and then you're supposed to be fine with it, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry I stuck you with my knife, man. I didn't mean it. And that's it. But here's a one that is this is UNAFEI, which is they got a huge restorative justice thing in it. A sample of images of restorative justice in action. With the support of a community circle, a young man who stole his father's credit card and charged over $1,000 in goods apologizes to his father, turns over his federal and state income tax refunds to his dad, and does community service at a local church. His dad says, "I got my son back." And I look at this and the interpretation, inmates from a woman prison help build a Habitat for Humanity home for a family. Wonderful. They're still inmates. They're still suffering. And they would probably do anything to get out of the jail for a while to experience fresh air and breathing.
Yeah.
A young woman who stopped dancing for years after a traumatic rape rises from her chair and dances gracefully around the room with a face-to-face meeting with the perpetrator.
What a bunch of kumbaya bullshit, Ed.
Well, if you take it back to its foundation, it goes back to a lady in Minnesota. This is where all these successes in Minnesota come from. But you consider the results, and they've had their years of this, Bill. They've had a group of years, and their results are we're 45th in the nation. There's another example here that I want to spotlight.
Okay, why don't you hang on just a minute here, Adam? I'm running a little bit behind, but we'll be back. We'll continue rolling through this. This isn't a conspiracy theory Thursday. This is the fact of conspiracy in our public school system in Oregon, not just Medford 549C. You can figure out that, given that this is ODE policy, that this is leaked into every public school district, wouldn't you say? Wouldn't it be safe to assume that a lot of this, Ed,
yes,
has been brought in?
I would agree.
Yeah, all right. We'll be right back. Mr. X here, community researcher, and so much more. It's Jump In, 770-5633. This is the Bill Meyer Show.
Artisan Bakery Cafe, your go-to for all things delicious. Now serving amazing summer specials. Try their turtle brownie, loaded with caramel and pecans, blueberry cream cheese coffee cake, chocolate hazelnut croissant, lavender cupcakes filled with Bavarian cream, and coconut cream beignets. So many fresh baked goodies just waiting for you. Swing by Tuesday through Friday from 7 to 3 and Saturday from 8 to 3 at 1325 Center Drive across from South Fred Meyer. That's the Artisan Bakery Cafe.
The Road Gardener is sponsored by Grange Co-op.
A lawn that's poorly installed will probably last at the most between 10 and 15 years. You just wish that you hadn't wasted all your work and all your money. The difference to having a good lawn, one that can be good for 40 to even 60 years with proper preparation, proper planting techniques, and proper after planting care.
Talk to the Road Gardener Saturdays 10 to noon. Hear the Sunday morning encore at 9 on KMED.
Coming up on the next Hughes Lumber. When 2x4s get together, only one thing can happen. Walls get built. Check out the studs, followed by contractors and do-it-yourselfers, featuring lumber, hardware, and siding, starring decks, additions, and ADUs. It's the return of home enhancements. But watch out for that knotty pine. Get the best build for your buck values at Hughes Lumber, your top show for quality, price, selection, service. So don't miss Hughes Lumber on Crater Lake Highway next to Garrison's.
Whether you need a weather-tight garage for your vehicles and toys, a functional workshop, an ideal barn for your horses, or an oversized covered riding arena, Johnson Builders has you covered. Choose from a variety of maintenance-free colors, warranted steel panel roofing and siding options, plus alternative finishes like stone, brick, or wood siding to match your aesthetic and functional requirements. Roofing material options too. Visit Johnson.Builders.
Johnson Builders, building for your future.
Sweetwater Sanitation are your experts in the sanitation business. With over 20 years of providing septic services in Southern Oregon, Sweetwater Sanitation gets the job done the right way. Sweetwater Sanitation can inspect, service, repair, and pump your septic tank so you can focus on enjoying time with friends and family and not a septic disaster. Give them a call at 541-821-1426 or check them out online at swsmodoc.com. Sweetwater Sanitation. Their service is the difference.
The Bill Meyer Show, 106.3 KMED.
And this portion of the program is sponsored by Valley View Nursery, the only nursery with online pricing. Head to valleyviewnursery.com. They're closer than you think. It's 8:41. Back with Mr. X. We've been going down this policy consensus restorative justice, and it all started, we've been talking about policy consensus Bullstein for years here on the program. And then we talked with Michael Williams, Medford 549C school board member, who is taking a lot of arrows for coming forward and talking about the truth of violence in Medford 549C. And Medford 549C has signed full bore on to restorative justice, which is essentially non-punishment punishment for some of the worst offenders that are out there. And I'm not even sure that Brett Champion's not just actually following the policy by what he does, but the school resource officer, Ed, as we were talking about, was reassigned. And Michael Williams believes, and so do many other people, that this is because he told the truth about what's going on with these policies in the school. And that could not stand. It embarrasses the bureaucracy, I guess, here, Ed. But you have another example of restorative justice. Let's hear that.
Well, these things are what we have to consider, okay? So here, there's two of them real quick I'll do. But under the guidance of a community circle and local probation, a dozen adolescents do home repairs worth $12,000 on a house they vandalized. The victim stops by to observe their work, and they share the excitement of their accomplishments with him. Okay? Oh, wonderful. They still vandalized the house and did the damage. Of course they should be responsible for the repair. Then it says a woman in her 70s whose daughter was raped and murdered over 20 years ago travels hundreds of miles to speak to groups of inmates in adult and juvenile prisons and offers hope that they can change. Now, her daughter was still raped and murdered. Your goal is to teach these kids at a younger age not to rape and murder, not to pillage, not to vandalize.
In the first place, not to assault, not to knife, not to shoot, right? That's where it needs to be coming from.
Everything in there is a decision-making process that they have to make. And all they're doing is allowing them to make the wrong decision time and time again. And what it's doing, the whole philosophy of this, I don't see our society improving. Over the past few years, what did we have? Medford, we had the Antifa thing years ago. We had all of these groups, all of these ridiculous appearances of things for social change, hope and change, do this, do that. All of this stuff comes about from people that have experienced no
ramifications for their behavior. All right. Hey, Ed, we're almost out of time, and ramifications need to be back hard and swift. And anyway, let's grab a couple of calls here before we run out of time, because I'm going to run out of time otherwise. I'll turn into a pumpkin. I don't want to do that. All right. And before we go to the calls here, Ed, I want to make sure we can get this in. All this information I'm posting on the Bill Meyer Show page on KMED.com. All right. And please go through it. If taxpayers, parents, look at what restorative justice, look at what the consensus process has done to the schools. This was invited in probably with the best of intentions, but probably more likely wishing to hide the results or the realities of violent public schools. I think it's more about hiding that. Of course the stats look better because you don't consider them crimes anymore, that kind of thing, because we put you in an indigenous circle. It's going to take pressure from all parents and taxpayers on the school boards to rescind these policies. These were choices that were made. You have to make meaningful public comments to your board. I just want to make sure that's the solution really in this case, is it not?
I agree, Bill. And the other thing, I want to make a statement, and this is going to require tremendous introspective technique with yourself. If you moved here from California, if you relocated here, if you came here, why did you leave? You came here for a reason. Why did you leave? Or if you came here for whatever. But look at your own philosophies. And if you respected restorative justice, did you respect it out of actually educating yourself to the actualities of what's happening with it? Or did you do it because you got an overview and it was a predetermined outcome, but ultimately it affected your life and you have to make a decision. Did it affect your life positively or not? And do you have the right to bring it in as a negative to us? And
also not telling us very clearly what you're doing. And that's what the districts did. Right.
And using the clandestine moves of using this consensus process through the involvement of mediation. And, we found years ago, we've been talking about it, Bill, this process is literally the tool, the implementation to reduce us in our understanding of life and the law, of what our country is supposed to function like. The reality the county should have had a will of self-determination so that people can have the life and the homes that they want.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm running out of time here, Ed. All right. Okay. I get it. But remember, Michael Williams was talking about how the parents and the students were feeling so frustrated about this because they have no power in this. And we're here to tell them they do have power. But you have to strike at the root of this insane policy that the school districts are following in many cases. And Medford 549C is all in on this. It's right there in black and white, Ed. Okay? And there has to be, it's up to them to rise up on this, okay? David's here. David, you're with Mr. X. We're talking about restorative justice, its infection of the public school systems, and more. Go ahead.
Bill and Mr. X, good morning. David here. There's an economic component to this that you may want to be aware of and discuss, and here it is. So in the state of Oregon, we spend about $18,000 per student per year. Where does that money come from? Well, it gets dispersed from Salem, and it gets dispersed based on the number of students that are in school. So what that looks like, if you're in 549C, they've got about 14,000 students. That's $250 million a year, which is about $28 million a month. That's just on the cash flow side. That's where all the money comes from to pay for all of the educators and their assistants that do what? That pay dues to the Oregon Education Association, the most powerful advocacy group in the Oregon legislature. So the more students that you keep in school by any means possible, the more money there is in the pot to continue to pay people that continue to pay dues to the OEA. Something you might want to think about. Yeah, absolutely. And I have no doubt that there are huge financial incentives to make sure that these violent students who should not be in the public school system are kept in there for that. Would you agree with what David was talking about there, Ed?
I exactly agree, except I would add one thing.
Yeah?
That all of that money that Salem distributes comes from us. That's our property taxes that go in there.
All right, and also money from the general fund. I'll grab one more call, and then I'm into pumpkin mode, Ed. Okay? Hi, good morning. You're with Mr. X. We're talking restorative justice. Fire away. Who's this?
This is John.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
You mentioned Minnesota. I was wondering how they rank school-wise in the nation right now, because about 60 years ago, they were held up as being the most modern, progressive manner of education, and we modeled a lot of our changes in our school to modernize our schools following the Minnesota model.
Yeah, I can't answer that off the top of my head here.
If I remember correctly from what I read this morning to answer his question, they were ranked like 24th or 25th.
Kind of in the middle of the rank then. That's what it looks like.
Kind of in the middle of the rank. So all of the efforts have brought them to halfway, but they have a lot of other efforts that are going on, okay, that we don't have. They don't have the Dispute Resolution Commission part of it, okay? We have, okay, the worst possible thing is in 2003, they made the university system a state agency. Now, there's only one other state that I can track down, and that's Massachusetts, which has been one of the most socialized states that there is. They have, second to them, adopted this agency of the state thing with the university. The reality is that should be removed. That needs to be removed.
Because it gives us all this government-to-government power from the state university pushing a hard left kumbaya agenda damaging to society, Ed, in every aspect of our life.
Look up the ties. Look up where the Oregon Department of Education is housed, how it's run, how it's operated, and it's under University of Oregon, Oregon State University. All of these things have a combination of control over that. And what you have is a bunch of people experimenting for a social engineering company.
And they're experimenting on our kids. And meanwhile, our kids are in school systems that are, hey, number 45, we're 45. Yeah. So parents, taxpayers, you got to get in on this. You must read the information that Ed and I are putting up there. Share it with your friends. Now, there's a lot to it, but there's even some key quotes in the documents that Ed has that I'm posting today, this morning. I'm going to do it shortly after I get off the air. And get your comments in to your school district. Get your comments into the Medford 549C board and tell them withdraw from these restorative justice consensus process programs. They got to go because they're not working.
That's it.
All right. Ed, thank you so much as always. Thanks for taking the time and doing the searches and connecting the dots of this sordid policy that has invaded our public school systems, invaded our criminal justice system, too, for that matter. Thanks, Ed. Be well.
It's invaded every aspect of our lives, Bill.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. 8:52.
This hour of the Bill Meyer Show is brought to you by Johnson Builders, Southern Oregon's leading